We don't have money to pay these bills.
But you can buy this.
New world, daily puzzle.
Solve it yourself.
We're being silly about this.
Life's too short to play. Play Wordle together instead.
The world is in the midst of a global food crisis that is leaving families and children starving. Please, will you help save a life today? Your support provides life-saving food to families and children in crisis. Text GIVE to 97691 or visit WFPUSA.org/TV to give just $15 a month.
Interesting. What can't you do with one hand?
No cap.
You do this? One hand? Pretty good. You just can't turn it off. 3, 2, 1.
I wanted to share the story of how my baby father faked his death.
No. Also, when he said I'm happy to receive, that's very Alaska to me. It's the only part you do sex in my life. Baby mother, you're like, I'm done with baby.
In the wake of the tragic deaths of 3 Israeli hostages killed by Israeli soldiers in northern Gaza, a large crowd gathered in downtown Tel Aviv on Saturday night in what has become known as Hostages Square to demand that the rest of the hostages in Gaza come home, demand that the Netanyahu government does more. I spoke with a number of relatives of hostages, some who have been released and some who remain in Gaza, who say that Prime Minister Netanyahu needs to be more proactive and put a plan on the table, prioritize the release of these hostages over the military operation. Here's what the cousin of one of the hostages had to tell me.
But I believe that such a tragedy that could have been prevented by a deal between Israel and Hamas, they must change things now. They must pick a different course, and I think it's possible.
We also heard from Prime Minister Netanyahu, who expressed much of what the country is now feeling, that the 3 men were so close to being free after more than 2 months in captivity. Netanyahu saying that we were so close to embracing them, but we cannot turn back time. He again argued that it is the military operation that led to the initial wave of hostages who were freed, and it is the military pressure that will help get more hostages released. But I spoke with the daughter of a hostage who was released several weeks ago, who said that in light of what happened on Friday with the killing of those 3 hostages, they are now afraid for the lives of those who remain in Gaza.
They heard all the bombing, and they were very, very frightened that the bombing will be falling on them, that they will die from the army missiles. Yeah, and they told us didn't believe that the army really knew where they are, because they were shooting very, very close, and they heard all the loud noises of that bombing. And I really think that we should do anything to stop the war.
The IDF is taking full responsibility for the deaths of these 3 Israeli hostages, all men in their mid to late 20s. They say that the hostages did everything right to prove that they weren't militants, and that the soldiers violated the rules of engagement. At the same time, the IDF is saying that this is a very chaotic, tense situation with lots of terrorists trying to attack IDF troops wearing civilian clothing. The 3 Israeli hostages emerged from a building near the soldiers' position. They had no shirts on. They were trying to show that they didn't have explosives. They were waving a white flag, and in firing on the hostages with a white flag, that's when the troops violated the rules of engagement. 2 of the hostages were immediately killed. A third was killed later after he had run into a nearby building and was shouting in Hebrew. Their bodies were taken back to Israel, and they were confirmed to be the bodies of the hostages. Now this raises all kinds of questions about whether the IDF is being careful enough and about their rules of engagement. There have also been a number of friendly fire deaths among the Israeli troops who have been killed so far. And then, of course, the global outcry about the thousands of civilians among the Palestinian population of Gaza who have also been killed, which has led the United States to put a lot of pressure on Israel to tell them to be a lot more surgical and a lot more precise, generally, in their military operations in Gaza. Alex Marquardt, CNN, Tel Aviv.
Former President Donald Trump returns to the Granite State for the first time in a month, continuing a ramp-up of political activity heading into the final weeks before voters start to cast ballots in the Republican presidential primary. During his remarks, President Trump continued the dark and what the civil rights group has said is xenophobic rhetoric about undocumented immigrants. Take a listen to what he said.
They're poisoning the blood of our country. That's what they've done. They poison mental institutions and prisons all over the world, not just in South America, not just the 3 or 4 countries that we think about, but all over the world. They're coming into our country from Africa, from Asia, all over the world. They're pouring into our country.
For former President Donald Trump, the focus of many of his recent campaign visits has to convince their supporters not to be complacent. They know what they're leading in the polls, and there's been a lot of coverage about how much they're leading in the polls, and they don't want their voters to think they don't have to show up at the caucuses or at the primaries. He said they need to, quote, weed out the insincere rhinos. He also spent a lot of time talking about New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu, who endorsed his rival Nikki Haley this week, the former South Carolina governor. Listen to what he had to say about Sununu.
So what he did is, his wish was whatever he could do to stop Trump, because he didn't like me and I didn't like him. But the thing is, I didn't like him. I always felt guilty. I gave New Hampshire everything they asked for and much more. And it's hard to do that when you can't stand the governor, right? But a selfish guy.
While Trump was in New Hampshire, many of his rivals were in Iowa, the first nominating state. Their caucuses are going to be on January 15th. DeSantis got there on Saturday and is going to be there for the next few days. Haley arrives Sunday, and she will be spending the rest of the week there as well. Trump, meanwhile, will return to the Hawkeye State on Tuesday. Steve Contorno,